This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, this show has waited 6 seasons to finally uncover one of the great film franchises of all time. Star Wars is up today. We also welcome in our returning celebrity guest, a comedian and host of the Midnight Facts for Insomniacs podcast, making his 7th appearance on the show to date. It's Shane Rogers.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be back. Feels like I was just here, probably because I was just here. I think it was just a couple weeks ago. So it's fun to be back, and we'll make it 8 soon.
Yeah, sounds great. We also welcome back our other returning celebrity guest, because on these Star Wars episodes, 3 voices is just not enough. Our other returning celebrity guest is making his 4th appearance on the show to date, a fellow member of CineMadison. Please welcome in Jesse Sertle. Why did the sound effect not work? I think I'm leaving that in. I'm definitely leaving that in.
I would leave that in. Yeah, that's, I was going to say, I'm not a celebrity, so people should not be clapping or making noises for me.
It's been a while, Jesse, since you've last been on. I think it was last July for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I think so. I think it's been about a year.
I can't remember if Easy Rider or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came first or second, but yeah.
Hollywood was second, because I remember I was drinking because I was late at night.
Fair enough. I mean, that movie definitely lends itself to drinking. But anyway, so, gentlemen, thank you both for being on what I think will be a special episode. I know everybody has varying opinions. This is obviously a very important movie to a crop of people. For other people, they don't give one flying fuck about what we're about to discuss. My dad would normally be one of those. However, we're going to plow through it. This is obviously a significant and seminal movie to a certain group of people that grew up in the 70s. How many of us were alive during the 70s, might I ask?
I was alive. I was 2 when this came out, when the original came out.
It'll be an interesting discussion. As it mentioned, tonight, for our 260th episode, we discuss the independent film darling of 1977, Star Wars, written and directed by George Lucas, music by John Williams, cinematography by Gilbert Taylor, starring Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia Organa, Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin, Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, Kenny Baker as R2-D2, Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca, and David Prowse as the body, and James Earl Jones as the voice of Darth Vader. Background for the movie: Star Wars was released on May 25th, 1977. On a budget of $11 million, the film would gross $410 worldwide, becoming only the 6th film since 1915 to become the highest-grossing movie of all time, and by far the number 1 film domestically and worldwide in 1977. Critics were effusive in their praise for the film at the time, and it would garner 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Director for Lucas, Supporting Actor for Alec Guinness, and Original Screenplay. Star Wars would win for Art Direction, Costume Design, Film Editing, Original Score for John Williams, Sound and Visual Effects, as well as 2 Honorary Achievement Oscars. Star Wars quickly became a worldwide pop culture phenomenon, launching an industry of tie-in products including novels, comics, video games, amusement park attractions, and merchandise, such as toys, games, and clothing. The release of the special edition in 1997 was the highest-grossing reissue of all time, with a gross of $138.3 million, bringing its total gross in the United States and Canada to almost $461 million, reclaiming the all-time number 1 spot. Adjusted for inflation, it had earned over $2.5 billion worldwide at 2011 prices, which saw it ranked as the third highest grossing film of all time, according to the Guinness World Records. At the North American box office, it ranks second behind only Gone with the Wind on the inflation-adjusted list. Star Wars has been recognized on the following lists by the American Film Institute. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 15 in 1998. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills in 2001 as number 27. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains in 2003 with Han Solo as the number 14 hero, Obi-Wan Kenobi as the number 37 hero. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes in 2004, May the Force Be With You at number 8. AFI's 100 Years of Film Scores in 2005 as the single greatest film score of all time. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Cheers in 2006 at number 39. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition in 2007 at number 13. And AFI's 10 Top 10 list in 2008 is the number 2 sci-fi film of all time. Star Wars was voted the second most popular film by Americans in a 2008 nationwide poll conducted by the market research firm Harris Interactive. In 1997, it ranked as the 10th greatest American film on the Los Angeles Daily News Readers poll. In 2002, Star Wars and its sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, were voted the greatest films ever made in Channel 4's 100 Greatest Films poll. In 2008, Empire magazine ranked Star Wars at number 22 on its list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. In 2010, the film ranked among the all-time 100 list of the greatest films as chosen by Time film critic Richard Schickel. In 2011, it ranked as the best sci-fi film on Best in Film, Greatest Movies of Our Time. In 2014, the film placed 11th in a poll undertaken by The Hollywood Reporter, and in 1989, the United States Library of Congress named Star Wars among its first selections to the National Film Registry. At the time of its induction, it was the most recent film to be selected, and was the only film from the 1970s to be chosen. In 1991, Star Wars was one of the first 25 films inducted into the Producers Guild of America's Hall of Fame for setting an enduring standard for American entertainment. The soundtrack was added to the United States National Recording Registry 15 years later in 2004. Star Wars currently holds a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 90 score on Metacritic, and a 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Now, I should clarify that this is Star Wars A New Hope, which has been recognized as later on in its run of film history, although at the time it was just simply known as Star Wars. Now, we obviously have multiple different episodes to watch and enjoy, depending on your mileage of different trilogies and whatnot. But as we start each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I do believe that I went and saw this in the theater with some friends of mine that were in high school. I would have been in junior high.
Roughly 13, 14?
I was 13.
So you would be in the prime sweet spot age for this movie when it originally came out.
Yes.
Do you like the movie?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
I liked all three of the originals. I saw all three of the originals in the theater. Did I go gaga and put on spacesuits and live and breathe Star Trek and Star Wars and all the rest of that? No. I also saw the first 4 Star Trek films, but I enjoyed them for what they were, but it was just a film to me.
You did not try to practice the religion of the Jedi?
No. And I thought, and in college, I lived in the same dorm with the Beloit College Science and Fiction or Science and Fantasy Club, and they would watch Star Trek on television all the time. They would reenact the scenes from Star Wars in the quad, not to mention having chainmail and joust. So never did any of that stuff.
Yeah, you were much too serious.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing is you just assume because I'm not enthralled that I didn't like the films. I did. Now, the next 3 that are the prequels, I watched some of those with you, and I was never so bored. They were terrible. They were so boring. I mean, it's a good thing George Lucas sold the franchise rights, because the final three would have been just absolutely unwatchable if he would have continued.
So as the next oldest, well, I'm going to assume next oldest person in our cadre of people here, Shane, I have to assume at 2 you were not in the theater to see this, but you probably have a different experience than myself growing up in the 90s connecting to Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a Star Wars universe. I was obviously too young to see the first one, but I saw Empire Strikes Back. No, I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater. I think I was 8. So I grew up, I had the action figures. I had all the VHS tapes. I had various different implements that I used as lightsabers. So yeah, I was very into the series. It's been interesting. I think there was a lot of nostalgia for me when the new ones came out. I was very excited. I didn't wait in line. I had some friends who waited in line overnight to see Phantom Menace. I wasn't that excited about it, but it was a big deal. It was a big cultural shift to a new generation enjoying Star Wars. And like Dana, I was incredibly disappointed, I guess would be the nice way to say it. And to me, it really, the new series really sullied my enjoyment of the first ones, honestly. I just felt like, okay, we've cheapened this whole thing. It's ridiculous now. So I have a complicated relationship with Star Wars now, where I feel like it's kind of hard for me to go back and watch the originals without putting them in the context of this juggernaut, this corporate, ridiculous juggernaut of awfulness that I think Star Wars has become. But it was nice to be able to sit down. I hadn't watched the first one in a long time, so rewatching it for this was interesting, and I guess we'll get into it. I had mixed feelings about it, but I was able to rekindle a little bit of the nostalgia for that original trilogy that I think is so brilliant and foundational in pop culture.
Jesse, I think you're about a year older than me, if I remember right, but we're basically contemporaries for the purposes of today. I remember my relationship with the originals being something I saw when I was probably about 9 or 10. I did not have the same connection as people when, Phantom Menace was coming out. I remember, the promotional campaigns and seeing marketing for it at Pizza Hut. But I don't remember, being excited to go see it, or it was something that connected with me. I remember seeing the reissue commercials when they were showing them during, the Super Bowl and such, and ads on, Pepsi cans. But realistically, Star Wars didn't start for me until I think I rented the VHSs when I was about 9 or 10 from the local video store or something. And I said, okay, these are important to people. I got to find out why. And so I think I sat on a random Saturday and just plowed right through them in my summer break. And I enjoyed them. I don't think I came to quite the level of nostalgia and fervor that others had to it until probably later, after I'd seen them multiple times. And part of that has to probably do with never really seeing any of them in theaters until I was in high school. I think the first one I actually saw in theaters was Episode 3. And at the time, that was one of my favorite ones because it had a lot of action. It had a lot of great lightsaber battles. It was the stuff that you enjoy when you're a kid. Now going back to watch it, I think last year I watched it for a project for a different podcast. And I'm like, God, this is so bad. Why is this so bad? So as you age and progress through this universe, if you see these, I think when you're a kid, you have a certain level of attachment that's different than if you come to them maybe as an adult and think they're kind of goofy, and you don't have the same level of wonder that I think people have a special place for that grew up with these movies. I don't know if that's good or bad, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to judge anybody for that and your relationship to it. But as Shane highlighted, between the prequel trilogy and then I was really disappointed by the sequel trilogy once we got to Rise of Skywalker. I was pleasantly surprised with Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and I know there are a lot of people that have a very complicated relationship with Last Jedi as well. But every time they release one, it seems to change everybody's relationship with this franchise as a whole. Like, these are so sacred every time one comes out, and I'm not sure that it's that franchise anymore. But Jesse, did you watch these as a kid, or was this much later for you?
It was a kid. You said like 9 or 10 with you. Mine was probably younger than that. I remember watching it on the 20-inch screen. That's how big our TV was. And that was probably the last time that I had watched it in its entirety. It was on the 20-inch screen in the 90s. Since then, it was like, I'd watch a couple scenes and turn it off because my opinion of the movies when I was watching them growing up, that first couple of times, they weren't that impactful to me. Prequels, though, those were big. I recall that. I don't recall any of the lead up to it. I just recall when Phantom Menace came out. That was huge. I remember they had little toys associated with it. I'm not saying I'm a big fan of it. It is my favorite movie of all of them, Phantom Menace. I'm dodging some knives right now, probably being thrown at me.
Oh, I'm definitely clipping that out and putting that all over the internet this week.
It is. That is my favorite one. The other ones after that, I'm agreeing, boring. The new ones, I just think those are just kind of cash cows. I think I watched The Force Awakens and the next one, part of the next one. I don't even remember if I finished it. I think I watched Rogue One, but like after those first newer ones that came out, I'm like, okay, they're just milking this. This doesn't make sense anymore. But like my relationship with the movies, they're just something. They're just another movie to me. I understand their significance. My relationship with movies more is with the people who enjoy the movies, because they seem like they have to like try to convert me. That seemed to have been the theme throughout my entire life. Is like I give that opinion. I'm like, I don't really like them, and then all of a sudden I'm someone that has to be converted to the religion of Star Wars, and that gets annoying after about the 30th or 40th time. Just trying to explain to them, you're not going to convert me, but thank you, but no thank you, and they get very upset about it. But that's my relationship with the movie, is everyone who loves the movie trying to convert me to the movie, which will never happen. Even after this rewatch, which I'm going to have to make an opinion on the rewatch. The rewatch I watch, I guess, is the new George Lucas versions where he came back and updated it. That's not how I remember it, and it cheapened the movie, in my opinion. I did not like this new updates that he put to it. It just kind of made it look even sillier than it was when I was growing up.
So you're a definite Greedo shot first person. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I do have my only good opinion about it is I'm happy that he kept in the guns and then changed them into walkie-talkies. That was the nice part. I was happy with that.
Okay. I'm not sure where you're going with that. But...
It's an E.T. reference, so they changed. And when they updated for E.T., they changed the guns the FBI agents had to walkie-talkies. So
okay,
they make fun of it in South Park all the time.
Oh, well, I'm not a procurer of that program particularly, but fair enough. All right. So let's take a shot at this. I know that opinions will likely vary, and that some people just see this simply as an entertainment movie. I think what, to a degree, separates some of the better parts of Star Wars a little bit out is that it does feel, at least to me, about something. So I'll give each of you the floor individually to try and figure out what is the movie actually about.
I mean, I can jump in. I think we've all probably heard about George Lucas's obsession with James Campbell, I believe is his name, and the hero's journey. It's about the big sort of universal themes, right? It's about good versus evil. It's about the hero's journey, sort of finding yourself, the coming of age story. I think George Lucas wanted to package everything that he had loved about mythology and the great epics, space romance. It was just his sort of love letter to all of the things that he had been nostalgic for in his childhood. But I think that it's not about anything other than exploring these giant themes. At least the first one. I think it kind of takes different pathways as it goes. But I think that's ultimately what it is. It's about the biggest things that sort of all movies are about, kind of distilled down to their basics, or not all movies, but what we would consider to be, the classic themes of adventure movies and space operas, and all of that is kind of was distilled into this movie and then became the template for all of them going forward.
I believe it's Joseph Campbell.
I was going to actually, as it was in my head the whole time while I was saying that, I was like, James Campbell's not right.
If I were to take a shot at this, I think I would agree with most of what you have there. The origin point for Star Wars and George Lucas's conception of things is tying together a lot of different movie themes, different ideas. He's obviously loosely based the entire story on an Akira Kurosawa movie that most people know. At least that are probably to listen to this podcast, most people know. The Hidden Fortress. And he's blending themes of World War II movies where it's a great evil, an oppressive tyranny, dictatorship with rebellion and some remnants of democracy. He's borrowing certain politics that are all blended together in this, but then somehow Darth Vader and the stormtroopers all have like a Asian architectural and costume designing motif to a lot of them. So there's a lot of mixed cultural aesthetics in all of this. And I think for the most part, he probably borrows the mythology from Western culture, but with the design and look and feel very much from an Eastern cultural perspective, and somehow makes this thing that is, it shouldn't have worked, but is widely popular.
My thought process is kind of short. I just thought it was a reimagining of fantasy and 1950s cowboy flicks. I mean,
there you go. That was where I was going to go. This is just taking a Western and putting it out in space.
All right. I won't belabor the point then. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole all of you want to go with me. But...
No, I can be more philosophical. You know, it's about life and living and enjoying and
It is. I mean, to an extent, you know, there is a lot of Eastern philosophy in there. I think we're doing it a disservice to say that it's just a Western, but you know, the idea of the Force and everything, there's Roman history. Obviously, it's the Republic becomes the Empire. The Vader and the Stormtroopers are obviously Nazi references. I mean, there's a lot in there. But I do think that ultimately you're right. It is just a swashbuckling. You can kind of simplify it down to a swashbuckling story of adventure. But I think there's a lot there behind the scenes that you can unpack.
To your point, and borrowing from the narrative of a very obvious hero's journey, I mean, you have the sidekicks that are all kind of rebellious rogues. You have the robots who, in his conception of them, are very Laurel and Hardy-esque, the fat man and the tall man type of situation. So he is borrowing a lot of things, and somehow he pumped this all into the same thing, and it works. And we're trying to somehow recreate this formula to varying degrees. I don't know if anybody can quite put their finger on what made this special to begin with, to put that in a bottle again. And so I'll transition into this question. This is obviously, at the time that I was a kid and before Phantom Menace, was thought of as like the seminal film franchise that was enormously popular. Thus why people were camping out for Phantom Menace. Because to release a new Star Wars movie was unfathomable. But I don't know, with every movie that they've released, every TV show that they now have, if it will ever come to the point where it's recognized in the same level of culture. And I guess, is that more of a byproduct of they've ruined their own brand by just putting out poorer product? Or is that also a byproduct of the lack of a monoculture that we have anymore?
I go with the first part where they just kind of flooded the zone with everything. Too much. I think they should just kept it as the 3.
What made it connect to a large extent is really, you know, yes, it has more intellectual themes built within it, but the concept itself was relatively simple. It was something that was easily adaptable and understandable, especially to children who became infatuated with it at that time. If you compare it to the original Star Trek films, they were much more adult and adult themed, interpersonal conflicts, etc., than Star Wars was, which made it harder to relate for younger individuals who became infatuated with it. So Star Wars surpassed Star Trek for that reason, at least in my opinion. And it's one of these things where you can go and just enjoy the whole concept of it, and you can always look into it for more meaning as you're watching it again or thinking more clearly or deliberately about it. The only thing I have seen that has had the same level of cultural impact is Harry Potter. And I don't know if it's because of the films as much as the books. But that became the same type of thing, which really spoke to an entire generation of children who have since matriculated into adulthood and carried on this fantasy theme, going forward. So it's just some things hit and they touch a cultural aspect, usually at a particular time. America was going through an upheaval. We were coming out of the Vietnam War. We were looking for simpler concepts. This is good, this is evil. And we'd been in this conflict for so long about those that were good were not really good, they were evil. And those that were evil were not really that evil, but good. And we kind of lost track of where we were. This made it simple, and I think it connected at that time. Now, the other films, I think that to a large extent they didn't connect as well, the first trilogy, because it was a different time. What made it popular is all the people who grew up watching the original three ran out to see them. They watched the first one, and well, I'm going to give the next two a chance too, because I love Star Wars. But I think that some kids who grew up and those were the first ones they saw in the theaters have a better appreciation and love for it. But I don't think they necessarily make the same connections with the public in general as the original three did, simply because of the time frame by which they were done.
I mean, maybe Jesse could speak to this more, because I find it interesting that to think of now, had I not grown up in the world of the original trilogy, if I went back as someone my age or the age I was when I watched Phantom Menace and watched the original trilogy for the first time, would I have connected to it, or would I have been like, this looks dated and ridiculous? And we are a product of our time, and I had so much nostalgia for those first ones. But I know younger people who did grow up with the newer movies, with the prequels, and they have that kind of affection for those prequels. That is their version. A new generation got its own trilogy and then more. And so that is something that really kept Star Wars in the zeitgeist, was that it was updated for a new generation. And the new ones, I don't think were really built for the people who watched the originals. I think a lot of us went and were turned off by them, or maybe kind of grudgingly sat through the next series just because we had so much nostalgia and affection for the originals. But I think that is one of the things that Star Wars did really well, even though I resent it, is that it abandoned the original. It wasn't trying to evolve with its original audience. It just restarted with a new audience of children. And it said, here's your version of the original trilogy. And so now it connected to multiple generations. And I think that was really savvy. Does it bother me because I feel like it abandoned the originals and like I wasn't catered to? It wasn't still trying to connect with me. Yeah, that bothers me. But, someone like Jesse, who started with and maybe even Thomas, who started with the newer ones, you had your own Star Wars that you could that was built for your generation. And Jesse, you said you liked Phantom Menace when it came out.
I did like Phantom Menace. When I rewatched the New Hope, or I guess New Hope it's called, when I rewatched it, I kind of had the same vibes. That Phantom Menace kind of felt like the New Hope for like my generation. The other two, I recall seeing those in the theater with my friends when I was in high school and just thought they were complete trash. Essentially, our opinion of that was, this is just a 2-3 hour movie about Anakin whining about his life. That's essentially what it was. and I watched 2 of those. And basically, how I always thought about it is there's the prequel thing for the original thing for 1981, where they're just kind of like checking the boxes. Oh, yep, we got to make sure this guy's in it because, he's got a role later on in the series. We got to make sure Anakin's doing this particular thing because that's going to happen later on in the series, instead of trying to make their own distinct style. So that was my opinion with that particular movies. I just thought they were trash. I mostly just kind of laughed at them. The first one, I think I was like, it was more like probably like 11, I think, because it came out in 99. Like more like 11 when that one first came out. And that one had a little bit more bigger impact on me. I enjoyed it. It's probably, like I said, still my favorite. Watching for all his knives, still my favorite one of the series. I don't know what your opinion on that, Thomas, though.
I mean, I remember enjoying certain pieces of all of them, but as I've become a more, let's say, educated film fan, that has definitely changed. Like I said, when I went back and watched episode 3 for a different project last year, I didn't get what everybody hated about them so much, but it had also been probably at least a good decade since I'd seen episode 3. And now having to do this show every week and talk about people's individual acting performances and the cinematography and all of this other stuff, I guess there's more to it than just simple lightsaber battles, which was all you wanted when you were a kid. I mean, the reason that I loved Empire was not because it was like this great thematic movie and Yoda and all this other stuff. No, I liked it because it had the best lightsaber battle that I could remember between Vader and Luke. Well, Phantom Menace has a great lightsaber battle in it, and episode 3 also has a great lightsaber battle. That's all I needed as a kid. Now when we're talking about this much later,
I just remember lightsaber battles and like the fighting games that I had growing up and having Yoda as a character. I mean, that's my attachment to the movies. That's my probably biggest one, is playing with the characters in video games.
Yeah. Like, part of growing up in that prequel era was like playing Battlefront 2. And then when you got like certain characters within that universe that you could play with, those were fun. I remember playing Battlefront 2 for, I think there was one day where I played it for 14 straight hours. Those were the great old days in junior high and high school.
Those are rookie numbers
that you remember, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was really into that game. Yeah, even though I hated that franchise, but I think the game you can enjoy on its own.
Yeah, I would agree. But this is so pervasive, it would be hard to completely ignore as far as a phenomenon. I'm very curious. I know all 4 of us are fairly homogenous other than age. If we brought in some level of outside additional diversity as to how their approach would go for this and what their cultural relevance to it would be. But unfortunately, I know mostly white people. So we'll move on.
Apparently like George Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, they did try to, I think, make it a little bit more diverse as it went on. And that may be something in the newer versions that does resonate more with a multicultural society. It seems very deliberate that they have tried to diversify and kind of olive branch, because the originals were so, other than what, Lando? Like, other than that, they're completely, basically white.
I suppose Chewbacca is not white.
The actor was.
James Earl Jones is the most black thing about the original movie.
And the guy in the suit is white, but oh well.
All right. Are we ready to dig further into this? Dad, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
Yes. Star Wars is set in a galaxy far, far away, under the oppressive rule of the Galactic Empire. The story follows a young farm boy, Luke Skywalker, who discovers his destiny when he comes across a pair of droids carrying secret plans for the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. With the guidance of Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, as well as the help of a roguish pilot, Han Solo, his co-pilot, Chewbacca, and the droids R2-D2 and C-3PO, Luke embarks on a daring mission to rescue Princess Leia from the clutches of Darth Vader and to aid the Rebel Alliance in their fight for freedom. The film is a tale of heroism, hope, and the battle between good and evil.
Thank you. Did you know? George Lucas was so sure the movie would flop that instead of attending the premiere, he went on a vacation to Hawaii with his good friend Steven Spielberg. It was on that vacation that they came up with the idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Did you know? In early drafts of the script, R2-D2 could speak standard English, and he had a rather foul vocabulary. I think that would be a funnier movie. Although all of R2's English speech was removed, many of C-3PO's reactions to it were left in. Did you know? Harrison Ford didn't learn his lines for the intercom conversation in the cell block so that it would sound spontaneous. Did you know? James Earl Jones and David Prowse, who played the voice and body of Darth Vader respectively, didn't meet until 2012, 35 years after the film's release. Did you know? The actors found George Lucas to be very uncommunicative towards them, with his only directions generally being either, quote, faster or more intense. At one point, when he temporarily lost his voice, the crew provided him with a board with just 2 phrases written on it. And finally, Dad'll appreciate this one. Did you know? Due to the limited budget, the American cast members and crew, including George Lucas, all decided to fly coach class to England rather than first class. When Carrie Fisher's mom, Debbie Reynolds, heard about this, she called Lucas, complaining about how insulting it was for her daughter to be flying coach. Fisher was in the room with Lucas when he took the call, and after a few minutes, asked if she could talk to her mother. When Lucas handed her the phone, she simply said, "Mother, I want to fly coach. Will you fuck off?" and hung up on her.
That story just summarizes their relationship.
And with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 261st episode, we welcome back Rob Conlon of Westport Studios and Andrew Corns of the Revisionist Almanac to discuss possibly the greatest sequel ever made for its 45th anniversary. The Empire Strikes Back from 1980, directed by Irvin Kershner, written by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. Cinematography by Peter Shasitsky. Music by John Williams, starring Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Billy D. Williams. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. And of course, before we move much farther, Shane, what are you working on and where can people find you?
So still focusing on the podcast at this point. So Midnight Facts for Insomniacs on any podcast platform. And it is a show about fascinating facts. We are insomniacs who will keep you entertained when you can't sleep, or if you're just looking to learn some stuff in an entertaining way.
Excellent. And as always, all of our guests' links and individual credits will be available both on the website as well as in the show notes for this episode. Jesse, also for you, what are you working on and where can people find you?
I guess you can find me on Instagram. Maybe if I get a couple subscribers, I might post every once in a while, so you can find me there. Otherwise, it's storm season for my real job, so I'm getting prepped and ready to be on roofs for 24 hours a day.
That's a long time. I hope you have sunscreen.
Nope. It's going to burn, and I love it. There's nothing you can do with this type of skin. It just burns. There's nothing I can do. Sunscreen doesn't help.
We can lessen the potential damage.
No, not when you're up there. It just doesn't. It just doesn't help. When you're on a roof, it's just everything. It's like being on the surface of the sun the entire time. So just accept it and move on.
All right. Well, when you turn into a raisin in 3 years. But let's move on. We left off at best performances. Dad, who do you have down?
I have George Lucas.
I think it would be hard not to probably pick him almost by default, given this is his creation. He was involved in almost every level of what it was, the conceptualization, the direction, the writing, etc. It would be very difficult. Does anybody not have George Lucas? Hearing no responses, let's just move then to secondary. recognizing that George Lucas obviously has a significant footprint on this movie. But the interesting conversation is more who you have as your secondary performance.
Me again?
Sure.
Okay. I have Harrison Ford. Just because he's a crotchety old guy, even then, he's the comic relief through most of the film because he was obviously a movie star that in the making and clearly showed so in the entire film.
Okay, so we have one vote for American Treasure, Harrison Ford.
I would go John Williams because I think that this movie is not this movie without the score. I think that it's the most recognizable element, and it's the one that's been consistent throughout the films. In some ways, it's the only thing that kind of ties some of these films together, and it is a classic. It became legendary, and I think that it is one of the big reasons for this movie's success. Try watching it without the score, and it just does not hold together at all.
I would agree 100%. He was my best secondary. I think he creates a significant amount of character and tone with the music. It's bright and triumphant. The scrawl at the beginning of the movie just does not sound the same without this large orchestra section creating this ambiance of mysticism and bright music that immediately interjects you into the movie. And so I think he has a rather outsized footprint on the movie and the franchise as a whole.
I would agree. It's John Williams for me. I do mention about George Lucas. The reason why I love him for the best performance is the editing. I think the way he edited, especially the beginning part where you get that sense of impending danger the whole time, that could have been edited a completely different way where they could have just done all the scenes from the space and all the scenes on the ground. It could have been a completely different film, but like with the score, that's what I remember. That's the first thing I thought about when we're talking about Star Wars. I hear the huge score in the background, hear all the horns playing. I mean, that's everything I think about when it comes to actual like blockbuster movies and series like that. Because like I think of that score there. I think of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the score there, the Jaws score. That's what I think about with blockbusters. Is usually you got some score that's memorable through the whole movie. And this one definitely hits in. That's one thing I do remember throughout this whole thing.
To Jesse's point, I watched a documentary last night about the making of Star Wars, and there was an original cut that they showed that was apparently just an absolute disaster because of the editing, because the editing was just a complete mess and it made everything long and boring. And Lucas basically fired the editor. The editor would not do it his way and hired a couple new people and was very involved. And they kind of made the movie work because apparently it was just not watchable before.
I've seen that documentary too, and I'm like, oh, because that's my thought process. I'm like, oh, it seems like did a really good job, and I'm like, oh, confirmed that this would have been a terrible movie if edited differently.
I think that's most movies if they're edited differently than the final product. Although there are some bad movies that probably could use some improvement on those fronts. Like I was in a discussion last week, and I know this is way like a year and a half preempting what I'm eventually going to say. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings movies fan, and there are certain people that just absolutely adore the extended editions. But the more I've gotten into film, the more I recognize how great of an editing job Peter Jackson did to get those movies, not only like to a watchable length in a theater, but also just cut out some just unnecessary stuff. The added back in scenes. I'm like, this doesn't serve anything for the purpose of the story. It's just giving you more Lord of the Rings for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree as well on that one. And it's very jarring when because you've seen the theatrical version, the extended is very jarring to see the difference, especially because the cuts are really terrible.
Yeah, I remember I was getting the DVD and it would have the deleted scenes, and typically you're just watching going, I see why they deleted this. That was a good choice.
So then, as far as most charismatic for me, I know there has been a active film nerd discussion over whether any movie deserves some sort of acting nomination, let alone win, for voice acting. But if there were ever a consideration for a voice actor in a particular role creating a just terrifying villain, it's James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. He is my most charismatic because Darth Vader, again, or if you're talking outsized performances, he has very little screen time, and yet he's probably the most significant character in the movie.
Yeah, he was mine too. I think that voice is so recognizable. It's so visceral, and like the intonation, everything, it just kind of raises the hairs on my neck. Just a brilliant performance. And I think voice actors don't get enough credit for having to, I guess he had the benefit of actually, having an imposing figure on the actual screen that he could put his voice over. But in that documentary, they actually show the original version where they had the guy in the suit say the lines. And oh my God, you realize how important James Earl Jones is because it's just laughable.
I know originally I had James Earl Jones and Darth Vader as the most charismatic, but after rewatching it, I changed my opinion. I went to Harrison Ford. I thought he just completely chewed every scene that he was in. I thought he had the best character arc throughout the whole movie. My opinion on Darth Vader changed to the fact that he's just the biggest person in the room, and he's got a really cool costume. Other than that, I just thought, yeah, it's just another bad character, but like our evil character, sorry, not bad character. Watch out for knives. I gotta be careful what I say. I gotta be careful what I say here. There's people who love the film.
Well, but I do think that's the difference because, again, in that documentary, he still was the biggest person in the room. He still had the costume and the presence. And then when he's saying, you are a traitor and a blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And it just, you realize how important that voice is, that the voice does, I think, make the character. But I get that. And I think Harrison Ford is certainly, he was the one who became the biggest star out of this whole franchise. So, obviously he was the one with star potential, and it did come across in that movie. He would have been my second choice.
Yeah. And just further on the Harrison Ford portion for that character, when I rewatched it, I thought the movie is more about his character than any of the other ones, because I felt like he's the one that changed throughout the most throughout the whole movie. I mean, he's just the mercenary smuggler, and then he joins the Rebel Alliance like at the end. Whereas Luke kind of has the chosen one the whole time. He doesn't really change until like the second movie, where he has that conflict within his inner conflict in the self between turning evil or not turning evil. And then the other characters I felt were just too minor.
I'm not sure I completely agree with it, but I know that's not an unoriginal take either, so I can't really go at it too hard.
Okay.
Dad, most charismatic?
I had John Williams because John Williams in the score actually created a character as big and as real as any of the actors in the film itself. By the way, I just happened as a side note, who gave John Williams his Oscar for this film?
That's a good question.
It was up until then the guy that was the preeminent scorer for films, Henry Mancini.
I don't know if I would call him the preeminent, but sure, okay.
He was the biggest one at that time. He had the most Oscar nominations for score after Dmitri
Tiomkin.
Passing of the torch, I guess.
And so, it kind of was the passing of the torch because he had Moon River, he had Pink Panther, he had Baby Elephant Walk from, what was the name of the film? Daktari. John Wayne film. So, anyway.
All right. For the super fans out there, they'll probably have more than 5, and you're certainly welcome to nominate any ones that I missed, but I'm just going to give you my 5 of what I think are the most important scenes in the movie, and then we'll try and decide on best scene without attempting to offend anyone and still probably doing so. First, I have the diplomatic mission takeover, which is the opening sequence where they board the ship and they find Leia, etc. Then I have Mos Eisley Cantina, which is basically skipping over what I find to be probably the most boring part of the film, where they're first on Tatooine and they're with the Jawas, and basically until they end up with Luke. I'm like, can I pull out my phone for like 5 minutes? Anyway, then I have the Jedi training on the Millennium Falcon. I have the detention block and the trash compactor, which is one of the more... I'm not even sure how to explain that scene. It's got so many things that I have questions for later. And then finally, defeating the Death Star. What else did anyone want to add?
I like the council meeting where Darth Vader chokes one of the generals. I thought that was a very good sparring between, I was just calling him lead Nazi general. I can't remember his name in the movie. But I thought that was a very good sparring where they're trying to see what the best way to crack Leia. I thought like how that scene kind of played out was really interesting. And it gives you kind of an impending doom of how powerful Darth Vader actually is. And how everyone doesn't really seem to care about him. They just kind of entertain the fact that he's there. At the same time,
I was going to bring that scene up because it's interesting. It says a lot without saying much that there is this race of Jedi or religion of Jedis that Darth Vader is really not even taken that seriously because it's been kind of eradicated, but you get the sense that he is kind of the most powerful. It is interesting too because he's clearly not the leader. There's Grand Moff Tarkin, I believe his name is, who sort of has Vader on a leash, but you see how powerful Vader is. And I think it's really well acted. It also, that's just an indelible image for me, is Vader kind of squeezing his hand together and the guy choking. It's just a really powerful visual that I think sticks with a lot of people and is one of the things I remember from the entire first trilogy.
All right. So out of diplomatic mission takeover, council meeting, Mos Eisley Cantina, Jedi training, detention block and trash compactor, and defeating the Death Star, what is the best scene? Don't everyone go at once.
Well, I've already mentioned which I thought was the best scene. So
okay, so you have the council meeting. I'll say I think it's the Mos Eisley Cantina just because it's the one where you truly have a certain level of separation. While you get a little bit early on with the Jawas that we have other creatures and aliens and things, this is the one that truly separates it out and says, we're in a completely different universe. And it is somewhat of an establishing moment within the grander universe, taking you truly into a universe far, far away. But we also get Han Solo and the Greedo kind of sequence. We get Luke and him getting into a disagreement at the bar, the guy getting his arm cut off. We first see a lightsaber, quote unquote, in action and what it can do. There are so many pieces to that are establishing of the larger Star Wars mythology that is more grandiose. And it comes at a nice pivot point in the film where you kind of need to expand on where you've been up to this point so far.
I would probably go with the trash compactor, but I would expand that to just the rescue of the princess. That whole sequence, I think, is the best. And I also like that it sort of plays against type. I mean, it was the 1970s. It was a rescue of a princess, and yet she grabs the blaster. She blows up the wall and kind of gets them all in. She's really rescuing herself in a way. And so I feel like it sort of undermines stereotypes and also is, at the same time, the most kind of cliched and exciting scene in the movie. It's, you can't go wrong with a damsel in distress rescue, right? But I think that they're able to put a new twist on it and make it really fun. It also, all the set pieces are just brilliant. And I think that's one thing that we haven't really touched on, and Dana would be able to kind of talk to or probably speak to this more. But the fact that it still holds up. I mean, obviously it looks dated. Obviously the effects aren't what they would be today, but it's not unwatchable. When this came out, Saturday Night Fever was the other big movie. And watch that now and try to not feel like this is a dated. I mean, Saturday Night Fever looks ridiculous, but Star Wars still holds up. I mean, those effects were something that no one had seen at that time. It blew people away. And like I said, Dana could probably speak to this more, but if you look at other movies of the era, it doesn't look anything like them. And those incredible paintings that they used in the background and the way they seamlessly blended in with the practical effects, it really is a movie that changed film and did things that people didn't even think you could do. I mean, it took 2001 and made it a million times more impressive.
I thought Saturday Night Fever was unwatchable in 1977 too.
It has nothing to do with the look of it either.
There were some of us that were rebelling against disco even then. So anyway, but yes, it was the look of it and everything. That's what made it so mesmerizing, because I mean, you ever watch, like, if you're spinning through and you catch, like, come to ESPN Classic or something like that, and all of a sudden they'll have some game on, and the graphics from the 1980s are like just absolutely abysmal, and that was high tech at the time. This was like way out there, and a lot of people just went to see it for the special effects. Completely mesmerizing for a lot of people.
You know what I find really interesting is that Jesse mentioned Lucas updated a bunch of CGI nonsense, and watching that version now, that's the most dated looking part. All the CGI that he put in there, because CGI has gotten so much better, that looks ridiculous. All the practical effects and everything else and the puppets, those I can still buy and they still feel tangible and real. But everything that George Lucas updated to try to make it current, since he was doing that in the 90s or whatever, it just looks terrible now. And so I think the originals, though, there is something to that, those paintings and the practical effects that really hold up because they feel so visceral and so kind of immediate, and they pop.
Did you give your best scene?
I have not. It's the cantina. But see, that's also the scene that most makes me feel like this is a futuristic version of a Western. Because how many Westerns was a pivotal scene within the bar? So it just...
Yeah, and you hire the desperado to take you on some type... Yeah, I mean, it's not an unoriginal take. There are many elements of Star Wars that feel very Western-like. And Han Solo is very kind of cowboy-esque in that sense. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he even has a gun holster that's like slung low on his hips. I mean, he's clearly intended to be a space cowboy.
Favorite scene for me is defeating the Death Star. It's also my most indelible. I mean, there are a lot of things you could pick in this. There are a lot of moments, the lines as I was going through it. And I just had to focus when we get to lines here on the ones that seem so universal within at least American culture. But the defeating of the Death Star is a significant moment. It is the resolution of the plot for the most part. It is the culmination of the movie. I think it would be hard to overlook that, but anybody else have other favorite moments or indelible moments?
I do.
I figured you would. You're iconoclastic in this.
I do have a favorite one. It's a very minor part. It's part of the rescue scene.
Yes.
When the stormtrooper's helmet hits the door as he's running in to the scene.
Has become a classic moment.
That is something I can remember. That was something I was waiting for the whole movie. I'm like, I couldn't remember exactly when it happened, but I'm like, I know this is the one where this guy, his helmet runs in and they keep it in. And I was wondering if George Lucas was going to keep it in, and he did. And I was proud of that moment.
My favorite scene is the trash compactor, because I think by far it is the worst scene in the film. I mean, what the hell? I mean, you put all of them together and that's your moment where they start to bond as a team, is in a trash compactor. I don't get it. It just made no sense to me. It's like, okay, whatever. I remember watching it and thinking this seemed out of proportion. Now I watched it again and I'm going, wow, this really does not fit. It's like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the others.
Interesting. That's exactly how I feel about the cantina scene. I feel like it's just out of place. None of these, it all looks like a bunch of ridiculous fake. It looks like Muppets. It looks like an episode of the Muppets, and they're playing the stupid little like tweedly music. And it just all of a sudden, I'm like, that's where I felt like, oh, all of a sudden we're on Sesame Street. Whereas the trash compactor, I think, is fun. It also I'm very claustrophobic, so it freaks me out. And there's a little creature in there. I don't know. I enjoy that scene. My favorite scene is a very small moment, and kind of like Jesse, it's just something. It's kind of a throwaway moment, but it's when Han is trying to fool the guy who's calling in to check on them. And he just has that moment where he's like, no, we're all good here. Everything's fine. It's okay. How are you? Like, there's just this moment. And I guess he apparently he intentionally didn't learn any lines for that. And he he was improvising, and it comes across as maybe one of the most human and real moments. And I've rewound that so many times because I just love that moment. I just find it hilarious.
Most indelible moments?
Death Star explosion.
Yeah, it's that minor scene or the Death Star blowing up. I can still see it in my head right now.
Yeah. All right. So with that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 228 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Ruth Buzzy, 88, American comedian, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, and actress, Sesame Street, That Girl, Golden Globe winner and 5-time Emmy nominee. Charlie Scales, 84, American actor, TV, The Wire, The Sopranos, movies, Liberty Heights. Andrew Carpin, 59, American independent film studio executive. Bleecker Street, Focus Features. Cora Sue Collins, 98, American actress, movies, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Anna Karenina, and The Unexpected Father. Peter McKeon, American record producer, Business as Usual, Cargo, musician, The City, and songwriter, producer for Men at Work. Jill Sobel, 66, American singer-songwriter, song I Kissed a Girl, supermodel. Priscilla Pointer, 100, American actress, movies, Carrie, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, Blue Velvet, and TV, Dallas.
I'm not really familiar with a lot of the people that are listed here. They're quite a few of them much older people in terms of passing away. A lot of people in their 80s. We have one at 98. We have one at 100. I mean, obviously lived great and incredible lives here. Lots of awards attention. Were in a number of different things. But much of the stuff that they were doing, I am not tangentially familiar with.
Well, Ruth Buzzy, I'm very familiar with simply because I watched Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In when it was on television back in the late 60s, early 70s. And she had a running character where she played the old woman or an old lady who would hit people with her purse when they said something she didn't like. And she did that on the Dean Martin roasts and such into the mid-70s. So I was familiar with her through that, and reruns of That Girl, for that matter.
Well, I mean, that's what she got her Primetime Emmy nominations for, and her one Golden Globe was for Laugh-In. So, but I figured you'd more than likely have heard of her and be familiar with her, given that you've talked about on this program multiple times, watching Laugh-In, likely at a very, very young age.
Yes. This is probably age 6 to 8, 9.
Yeah. We'll leave that there. And so we remember these here fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Let's move to best funniest lines. Since apparently none of us has a good Wookiee call, and I guess the best we can do is me sounding like Ray Romano when I try to do mine, we're going to just go right into it. My first one is the most obvious line of all time. Since this will be coming out this week, I will wish you all a happy May 4th with May the Force be with you.
I think the other obvious, probably the other most famous line is, "These aren't the droids you're looking for."
Oh, mine's up to beep boop beep boop boop beep beep woo. Although anything that R2-D2 does.
Han Solo. Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Vader, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Now, Vader, do we need to do the voice? The Force is strong with that one. I don't know. I just love it the way he pronounces everything. It's beautiful.
Line that could be said by many middle-aged married men. Han Solo, wonderful girl. Either I'm going to kill her or I'm beginning to like her.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, use the Force, Luke.
Also, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and an addendum to These Aren't the Droids You're Looking For, the Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded. Just a good Kenobi burn.
Forgot Princess Leia. Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?
Obi-Wan, I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened.
Han Solo, it's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
Which is great because a parsec is a measure of distance, not time.
Obi-Wan, that's no moon. It's a space station.
It feels so cheesy when you say it out of context.
Obi-Wan, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
Princess Leia, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
My last one, and I had mentioned it before as my favorite moment, it's Han saying, had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
My final one, it's Obi-Wan. Hello there. As they get the call back to the other ones.
Princess Leia, someone has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, flyboy.
Luke Skywalker, I have a very bad feeling about this.
I'm out.
All right, so I guess it's just me. It is the Tom time. Well, some other fairly notable ones that we might have missed. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Force will be with you, always. Which is just biblical, that they've reinterpreted. Then we have the title card from the crawl, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Luke Skywalker griping about Tatooine. If there's a bright center to the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from. Ben Kenobi, your father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight, not as clumsy or random as a blaster, an elegant weapon for a more civilized age. For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, before the Dark Times, before the Empire. Ben Kenobi, the Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. I'll be honest, the more I dug into the quotes, the more I realized that Ben Kenobi is just there for exposition to explain the universe to us. Ben Kenobi, you can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. And then finally, the line that gave me the most pause because it feels the most relevant to the moment right now that we're in. Luke Skywalker, look, I can't get involved. I've got work to do. It's not that I like the Empire. I hate it. But there's nothing I can do about it right now. It's all such a long way from here. As this is a self-proclaimed resistance show, even though we're discussing movies, that felt particularly relevant to me. So, let's move to the Stanley rubric then. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film, approximately 5 years after it was released up to today. So, 1981-82 to today. What is the overall legacy of the film? This is a category that we divide 5 and 5 points for a total of 10 between the audience generally and the industry as to how each of them feels about the legacy of this film. This greatness scale and the Stanley rubric feels like it was tailor-made to test something like Star Wars, and we will start here. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first. It's a 5. Cripe's sake. Both the industry and the public are 5s.
Okay.
I don't know of any film really that's had the level of cultural impact on society.
Does everybody else have a 10 for this? And we might save some headache.
I mean, we can argue individually how it feels for us, but I don't know how you can argue for society. I mean, it's a 10. It's the biggest franchise in history.
Well, for me, at the legacy, I think industry and then the public at large. I'd say the public at large is the 5 portion. The industry, that's where I drop it down. So I'm sitting about an 8. I think the industry has kind of probably gone past this movie. and gone on to different blockbusters that have come out and used that as their kind of their blueprint going forward. I think they've kind of forgotten about this particular movie in the industry wise, other than the fact of the franchise. But like the fans are what you could tell they're everywhere. They line up on the block still 20 years later to go see prequels that are terrible. But like I said, I can give it an 8. I can't give it a 10.
Okay, so I think unequivocally this is a 5 in the industry, because even if you don't go from the standpoint of that they're still trying to make sequels and TV shows and everything else, which is obviously by itself significant that there is a fervor for this type of content. Just the fact of something of this quality or variety was up for significant awards attention at the time, that it's so culturally revered that it was retired by the Library of Congress as one of the initial first things, because they recognized, even above Jaws, that this was significant in its moment, that it is one of the few films to hold the title as the all-time highest box office earner in its moment, and there have only been, I believe, 11 to this point that have held that title. I think it's unequivocally a 5. Where I would take a slight half step down is only that the audience, and especially for the originals, has soured a little bit on the franchise maybe as a whole, and maybe the original trilogy only because of the subsequent content that has not lived up to the standards of Star Wars. And so if I think you were to have somewhat of an argument against that overall, it would be there as opposed to with the industry. But that's just where I'm at.
I mean, you could say the audience has shifted, but there still is a huge audience. This is an almost 50-year-old movie, and they are still making, Disney, go to Disney Plus. There's still multiple series that they're making in the Star Wars universe and more movies coming. So I just don't know how anyone can argue that this isn't a 5 in both. If it isn't, what movie is? Like, this was the start of a 50-year franchise that is still going strong, maybe with a different group of people. I'm not as locked in as I was when I was a kid, but so many new kids were, and it's the biggest franchise in history. If you look at global revenue and or just number of people who go out to the movies, this is the biggest franchise in history. And I just don't know how you argue against that.
I guess I was trying to be a little nuanced there in not being somewhat fanboyish, but if you don't somewhat reserve this as being a 5,
like what
right,
gets a 10? What? Well,
I mean, we've gone Jaws is a full 10, and I would say that's somewhat comparable. It's in the same era. I think I tried to argue for a 10 for Legacy for The Godfather, and there was some disagreement there on that. But I get what your point is it is so culturally pervasive that the lines and such are just so well known, and the name Star Wars evokes emotions in people whether or not they like the franchise or not. So even on that front, I guess I'll concede. I will match the 10. So there's 3 10s and an 8.
The industry in and of itself spoke as to how valuable this was, and it started with this film. How many billions of dollars did Disney pay Lucas?
It was like $3 billion.
Yeah. Whole companies sell for less. This was a film franchise.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to get to it when it comes to Novelty, but ILM as part of that is also significant. So
yeah, ILM was created for this, or I guess in the wake of this. We wouldn't have Pixar. We wouldn't have most of the CGI that you have today. I mean, this is a foundational franchise.
So that's a 9.5 average between the 4 of us. Impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance of the film in the initial 5 years that it was released, as we normally split between the audience and the industry as well, 5 points and 5 points. Do we really have to go through the discussion? This is what I think is quite literally the standard version of what a 10 should be. Any disagreement?
No, I wouldn't disagree. I'd say it's a 10.
I'm a 10.
Yeah.
Like, I just think about the movies. Like, I think we kind of mentioned this earlier about the movies at the time. I know it was a movie like Damnation Alley that came out that same year. And just, it was, I've seen it in theaters and I can't believe I went and watched it. It was that bad. And to see this movie, I'm like, this is the standard of how to make a blockbuster, how to make a sci-fi movie going forward. And I think at that 5-year run, I don't know how you could argue that this wasn't one of the bigger things of that 5-year run between 77 and 82, right? And that 5 years is one of the big things in the movie industry. I mean, it changed everything at that point. I'd say even more than Jaws.
All right, then let's move to novelty, since we all had a 10 there. Novelty is the measure of the originality of anything having to do with the movie and the movie's execution. 5 and 5 points each for a total of 10. I guess I'll lead off here. On an originality front, I'd love to be more nuanced, but it is, again, and I hate to sound like the broken record a little bit on this. This was inventive. Whether you want to say that the story itself is a little bit, and like I'd accept some level of an argument that the story is not grandiose. We have the same complaints against Avatar, like that it's just basically borrowing its storyline and ripping it out of something else. This is loosely based on the Hidden Fortress. It's got some elements of other mythology and things that it's bringing to it, but it's combining it in a new way that feels exciting and fresh. And there really wasn't anything else like this. It reinvented what it was to make movies at the time. Add in all of the special effects and the other industrial great things, the practical effects that they were doing at the time, and everything it took to make this movie, and created an entirely new franchise, whole cloth, overnight. I hate to do this again, but I kind of feel like I have to go 10.
I see where you're coming from. We had a little bit of this talk, I think, with Ex Machina. I do think, though, that it is really an inventive repackaging, but it is a repackaging. I mean, all of this had been done before. Lucas basically took all his favorite things and mashed them together. He loved Japanese aesthetic. He obviously was based on another movie loosely. He loved the Joseph Campbell mythos. And he just took all those things. And yes, he did create something novel, but so much of it is easily identifiable as being, the charitable way to say it would be, borrowed. But he definitely stole from everybody. Now, I love that he did it, and I think he made it work. But all of this stuff had been done. I would probably go, I think combined, I'd go around a 7 or 8. I'm going to lean. I agree that because of the legacy and how much it changed everything, I'm going to go with an 8. I do think, though, it is very obviously derivative in so many ways.
I'd go with 7 on this particular one. It's, like I said, there are a lot of elements that I felt were basically like I said, someone said repackaged. I felt like the same thing, some repackagedness. But I feel like same thing with the impact. This is a completely different approach in my mind to making a sci-fi movie during that time period. I'm thinking, like, again, Damnation Alley, horrible movie. Don't suggest anybody watch it, but if you want to, you can see my opinion of what other 70s sci-fi movies are like. And this one is just miles ahead and different, and I think it changes everything going forward. But the story itself, I mean, it just, like I said, it just feels like the same thing, just a reimagining of a fairy tale cowboy movie from the 50s.
It was also, even watching that documentary was really interesting for the flying scenes, the TIE fighters. They literally took World War II films about World War II dogfights, and recreated exactly those shots. And, you know, he had loved all of these space operas when he was younger, and he went back and just took whole scenes, and recreated them lovingly with a lot of detail. The angles, the way that everything moved, you know, he didn't just use them for reference. He took these scenes and put them in his film as an homage in a lot of ways. But, you know, it wasn't, and I think he did create something new, which is why I'm going 8. But I mean, he straight up took scenes from other movies and just used them. And it's pretty clear in there.
Well, for me, the execution on this is a 5. Simply because he did it, and did it very well, especially in the method by which, you know, he had available, the means by which he had things available. CGI was not to the same level. He had to do a lot of other stuff, but he did it extremely well. So I have no problem with that. The originality It is a lot of elements that are repackaged. The originality, though, comes in the fact that he was the one to repackage it and how he repackaged it. It's kind of like anytime you have a restaurant that has fusion food, it takes two elements from two different things and creates something new. Does that mean that it's just, if it's a Korean Italian fusion, does that mean it's just Korean or just Italian? Or is it something new? So I'm going to give it a little higher points in originality, but I can't go full 5. So I went with a 4. So I'm at a 9.
So we quite literally have a 7, 8, 9, and 10. I think that's a first. And so that averages out to an 8.4 between the four of us. Excuse me, 8.5 between the four of us.
I was just going to say, that didn't seem right.
All right, classicness. This is the most difficult to put our finger on category. It's basically how well the movie has aged or not, with any number of things that could be a part of that. So because of the difficulty, and because my father seems to love living in the nuance of this category, he ordinarily leads off for us. I will let him do so here.
All right. If ever there's a film that potentially has the ability to be the ultimate in classicness, it would be something that has had a 50-year legacy. But I can't go 10, and it's for 2 reasons. I'm going to give it a 1/4 point down for, I know that the graphics and the CGI and such is improved. It's a little dated in spots. So I have to go down at least a little. I'm taking into account that for its time, it was revolutionary. And so it was better than anything else. So I'm giving it some benefit of the doubt because of where it was in the process. Where I have to give it another 1/2 or 3/4 point down, though, is the lack of diversity in the cast. And I find it interesting.
Wait. 3/4 point?
3/4 of a point.
No. 1/2 point or full point?
All right, so I'm going down 1/2 or a point. Let's just say it that way then. I'm at a 9 overall. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is I just find it odd that the only African-American actor doesn't even appear on screen. I mean, only the white people on Earth populated the universe? It's either Muppets or white people. So I got a problem with that. They tried to fix it a little bit as the next 2 movies. They kind of really did it more in the prequels and then the sequels, but I still have to give it points or a point down for that. So I'm at a 9 overall.
The only thing I could say in its favor on the diversity category is that Leia is a fairly strong female kind of led heroine character. But yes, this movie in some ways does deserve some issues, I guess is the best way to say it, for its lack of racial diversity within the universe, especially when we have a universe of just diverse aliens all over the place. But with that being said, I really don't have anything outside of your arguments, save for 1 point. Is it the fault of the movie to have the toxic fan base that is now so closely associated, especially after this last sequel trilogy, that I felt it much more in a hive mentality online? Is that the fault of the movie, or is that just we should leave that out because that's the fan base? I would entertain at least an argument to maybe have that be the fault of the franchise for creating this toxic fan base, but I'm also not sure that I would make that the movie's fault.
I mean, The Matrix has a toxic fan base, and it was created by 2 trans siblings. Like, you can't control how people reinterpret and try to own your IP. So, yeah, I don't think that's the fault of the series.
Fair. So then I'm also at a 9. So we have 2 9s to start.
I'll do a 9. Like I'm trying to separate, unless should I include the George Lucas version that I watched, the updated version. I don't know. That's my own thought process. Should I include that? If I do, I'd put it down to an 8 because that dated it really, really hard for me. But classicness, I'd say a 9. Like I said, everything seemed pretty on par with me. Like I wouldn't go back and rewatch it, but I didn't feel any dated other than the awful CGI.
Yeah, I'm right with you guys. I think that it is a movie that really stands up. I do think, surprisingly, the way that Leia was handled and how strong she is, she's one of the toughest badass characters in that film. But again, you can't give it a 10 just because of the diversity. So I'm going to 9 too.
Rewatchability, I'll just knock mine quickly out of the way. I've tried to be a little bit more objective with this category, knowing that I just simply do not rewatch a ton of movies. But if there were ever a franchise that objectively you could say is fairly rewatchable, it's this. Obviously, due to the amount of times that people have rewatched at least the original trilogy. I think objectively the fact that it's roughly about 2 hours and it's not holding your attention too much longer than that, other than to me, where their first on Tatooine is kind of slow. Other than that, I have really not too many other issues. And so objectively, I think this would be at a 9. It is not for everybody, and it is not rewatchable for everybody, because to me, that's probably closer to a 10, but objectively, I think a 9 is fairly standard here.
Tom, I'm with you 100%. I get so bored as soon as they get to Tatooine. Anything up until you meet Han Solo, anything from the droids landing on Tatooine, it just bores the hell out of me. And that stretch makes me not want to go back and rewatch this movie. I'm trying to be more objective and think about in general how people feel about it, but it's hard to take my own perspective out of it. For me, Empire, the entire movie slaps. Like I could watch that a million times. I have seen it a million times. I think there's not even a slow, dull moment in that film, but this movie has a lot of kind of checking my watch. And so for me, I'm going to give it an 8 for rewatchability. I just can't remove myself from the fact that there are stretches that to me are a slog.
Yeah, I'm going at it with a 6 on mine. Like I try to pull my own opinion out of it, because if it was just me, I'd say a 1, because I didn't enjoy watching the majority of the movie. But I got to think about the rest of the people and how many they want to watch it. But I can think of a contingent of people who would not come back and rewatch the original trilogy at all. Thinking about it's 50 years ago, they rather watch the newer ones. But I still give it like probably a 6. I'll go up 7. 7 probably better. Number 4.
I'm going to do this a little bit of a long way around. Years ago, when I was in law school, I worked for a bank, and the big bank across the street, all of the managers would come out at lunchtime, and you could either go to the left or to the right as you're facing them. And there would always be this huge group of people that always went to the right. And there would always be about 3 or 4 people that went to the left. And they were all going to lunch. And so I convinced this other guy I was working with, we should go follow the people that went to the left and see where they were going to lunch, because I think we would like that better. And actually, it proved really well, because we found this place that had like a commons where there was multiple places, really good food. Anyway, the point I'm making is it is not the matter of the fact that I don't like Star Wars, that I didn't like the films. You keep saying that I didn't like them. I just don't live them. I just don't agree with everybody idolizing these and making them almost deities in this world into something greater than it should be. I'm the one going to the left. So when they came out again, I was not going to stand in any frickin' line to watch them. I watched them when they became available. You were watching them, so that was good enough for me. Yes, I did enjoy watching the rerun, but I can't say that I'm going to go out of my way to really watch a rerun again. And it may be that I never watch it again. I don't know. But I'm going to give it this number based on the fact that if it's on, I will watch it again. And if somebody else wants to watch it, or if someday I have grandchildren and they want to watch it, I will sit and watch it with them and talk about my experiences. So I'm going to give it a 7, which I think under the circumstances, because it did hold a place in my early teens and something that I enjoyed at that time, I do have a nostalgic feeling towards it that merits a little higher number. So 7.
Okay. So that is a 7.75 average between the four of us. A lot higher than I thought it would be. I swear Jesse was going to give it a 1, and okay. So, interesting. But for audience score on this one, we had a 90% from Google users and a 96% from Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9.3. So to repeat the categories, we had a 9.5 for legacy. We had a 10 for impact and significance, an 8.5 for novelty, a 9 for classicness, a 7.75 for rewatchability, and a 9.3 for audience score, giving us a final total of 54.05. And any guesses as to where that currently ranks on the list?
I'm assuming very high.
13.
Not bad, Dad. It is currently going to reside between Saving Private Ryan and Raiders of the Lost Ark at number 12. So just outside the top 10, which I guess, Jesse, you were correct in your prediction before that the two movies you chose to be on this year really were not going to be in the top 10, but just barely did it stay out, at least for now. I'm sure we might have some sycophants that want to come on and revisit this with us and boost up the numbers, but I think that's probably fair for what we've done so far. Of course, and this is primarily directed at certain people that are probably furious with us right now, but if you disagreed with any of our scoring, or if you agreed with any of our scoring, let's just say that, you can find us at our email address, greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, for which I will be plastering all of Jesse's weird takes on the internet all week for him to see and get backlash for. Although I guess that'll be handled by us, so I don't know how much of a self-own that is, but regardless. And you can also find us on the website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast, where, again, you can find the full list with everything included on it. All right, let's get to remaining questions for this one. And I know I didn't send the notes for all of these because I hadn't yet rewatched the movie, but as I rewatched the movie, I think I wrote down most of these, and currently I have 8.
Okay.
What the fuck is in the trash compactor, and how did it get there? The like creature that swallows up Luke, or the one that has the eye that pops up?
I had the same thought process. I'm like, they just built this. How did it get in there? Why is it in there?
I thought they
Where
put
does
it in
it
there
go?
on purpose to eat the trash. It would be like a biodegradable system. You put it in there and it consumes the trash.
Okay, yeah. How does it supposedly survive in there? Does it like somehow have like an escape hatch or something? And
It's also very narrow, so maybe it doesn't trash compact all the way down.
See, I lived in the days before we had garbage disposals, and you actually had to throw your garbage into a garbage can. And you could throw the garbage into a garbage can all you wanted and seal it up, and you thought for sure. And then when it came time to dump out the garbage, there were always maggots in it. And you never understood where they came from. This is just an overgrown maggot.
Well, also with biodegradable stuff, if you throw it in compost, they introduce worms in there on purpose to help with the process. And maybe what was left was all the stuff that it couldn't eat. But maybe that was where all their trash went, and it was eating all the biomass.
not bad. I think
too
that
deeply on this creature.
All right, fair enough. I those are acceptable reasons. All right. Number 2. If Luke is short for a stormtrooper, how does the armor fit?
Yeah. I actually thought about that last night.
Okay. He found an equally short stormtrooper. And theoretically, they're all clones if you follow the prequel trilogy.
It was interesting. I went to like
Supposedly.
the Star Wars at Disneyland, they have like the Star Wars experience or whatever, and they were still kind of building it. It wasn't all the way complete, but they had stormtroopers running around. And I have to say, like, being up next to them, they had big dudes in the stormtrooper suits and with the mask and everything, and they were holding the fake guns, and they like walked, they would menace you. They would walk up and say like, show your papers or something just to mess with you. And it was actually pretty intimidating. I was like, Jesus Christ, these guys are freaking me out. It's an interesting, I just never thought, I always thought they looked kind of silly on screen. And I feel like they probably did get pretty big dudes to be those stormtroopers.
You can just run away. They won't be able to hit you with their saber.
Yeah.
Okay, if Vader is able to feel Obi-Wan's presence, how come he doesn't feel the Force in Luke or Leia when he's around them at all in this movie?
He does.
He does Luke in the speeder at the end, but he could have easily felt him and Obi-Wan in the Millennium Falcon as they're hiding. I don't know how he doesn't just sense that they're there.
Yeah, they have to bring out the like scanner.
I thought he just, maybe it was a misinterpretation. I thought there was a line where he felt something was in there. That's why he brought the scanner out, because he knows something's in there. Like he wasn't believing
but
that
he also doesn't
empty.
feel Luke's presence. He only feels Obi-Wan. Is it that Obi-Wan is so strong that he like drowns out because Luke has not yet learned to channel his Force ability? But then at the same time, he's quite literally the only other person that's a Force user around Leia. And if you take the prequel trilogies for face value, she's supposed to have like some Force imbuement that all the Skywalkers have that allows her to be very Force sensitive. How does he not recognize that at all in her at any point during the film?
Well, not to mention the fact that, as spoiler alert, you know, him being Luke's father, that makes him also Leia's father, and he didn't realize that and what the potential was of her power.
How does a ship go into hyperspace without a pilot, then arrive out of hyperspace and get sucked in by a tractor beam? Because that's their explanation for how the Millennium Falcon has nobody on it.
Yeah, a lot of the physics are bonkers. First off, they call hyperspace going to light speed. Light speed would still take millions of years to get between planets and star systems. You can't think about that too hard. It's like parsecs. Like, sure, it's okay.
It's a very small galaxy. That's all we're gonna have to think of it.
Apparently,
but it is far, far away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, what position is Grand Moff Tarkin that he can order around Darth Vader?
Yeah, that's the thing that has never made sense to me. You have this guy who's clearly the most badass in the universe, and he's just basically an attack dog for an old dude, and they're all below the Emperor, so that doesn't really make any sense.
Can the Death Star jump to hyperspace? Because otherwise, how does it move between planets so quickly?
It's supposed to be able to.
That's something that I kept thinking about, because when it was moving around the planet to shoot at the Rebel base, I'm like, I mean, it was just in hyperspace. Like, why did it hyperspace to behind a planet and then have to slowly move around it in order to blow up the other planet? But like, it just felt like poor planning to me from the Empire side.
My guess is that it's going into a semi-orbit around the planet because of the gravitational pull, but that it can't just, because of its size, that it can't just simply like travel like a ship would individually to the planet immediately. It's got to go into some form of an orbit. But that's the most kind explanation of the whole thing. All right. How does the Millennium Falcon shoot the TIE fighter at the end? We know that it only has two sets of guns, one on top and one on the bottom. And clearly Han is in the driver's seat when he shoots it. So is Chewie the one shooting? Because I think don't you see both Han and Chewie at the end in the front seats? So who's shooting the guns?
When after the explosion, they do show a shot of Han Solo celebrating. Is Chewie next to him?
That I think he is. If I remember right. I mean, I'd have to go back and watch the individual moment, but I think when I wrote down the question, it was them both pictured being there.
Yeah, that doesn't track.
Because there's no third person. And so then you would have to say that the Millennium Falcon actually has guns outside of the two turrets.
Maybe they were added.
Yeah, okay. And finally, how does Vader survive after this entire ordeal? He's in a supposed one-man fighter that has no capability for long range. His space station is now blown up. Does he just travel down to Yavin 4 or the moon and get brought back up later? Like, how does he communicate it all to be picked up somewhere? Does he communicate across this? That's never made sense to me. He's just like, we want to keep this character around, so we have him away from the Death Star when it explodes.
I think they communicated better in episode 3, where he kind of uses the Force to call out to the Emperor to come save him when he's on the planet burning to death. I think that you can use the same sort of thought process as the Emperor knows he's in trouble, so he comes up to save him.
Yeah, we talked about the Deus Ex Machina in our last episode, the machination by which these characters get saved that doesn't really make sense. But here you have basically magic. You have the Force, so you can always say, he used the Force. I mean, that kind of is the Deus Ex Machina for this series.
That's not how the Force works.
Also, I guess if I were to come up with yet a further question of this, assuming that the Death Star has a fairly wide blast radius, how long does it take for each of the torpedoes to cause the chain reaction and then have it so that they could safely get outside of the eruption or the explosion zone, but somehow Darth Vader never gets out of range? Does he have sense to see that it's going to explode and he figures that he's going to get outside of the blast radius? I mean, I don't want to step on this movie. I do this as somewhat of a labor of love for a movie that I've seen probably 24 times, but...
Yeah, some of these are legit questions and some probably feel like nitpicking.
So
I have a question to throw in here. So it's even read in your description of the movie, and I noticed it when I was watching it. What exactly are they farming? Because every scene's a desert. I'm confused about, because it says he's a farm boy, and I kept thinking to myself, what are you farming?
Like moisture farming?
yes, they are moisture farmers.
Okay.
That makes absolutely no sense either, but you're in a desert farming moisture.
Well, that actually makes sense. I mean, if you're in a desert, you can dig down and you can trap basically evaporative. There's ways to get water, and you would need that. The water would be like currency on that planet.
Okay.
But that makes sense. I could not figure out for life of me. I have a vision of what a farm looks like, and I'm like, there's nothing that looks like a farm here.
I don't know that that's true, but that I do know that you can moisture farm, and that it would make sense if that's the thing. But I'm not sure. I don't remember if that's what they're doing.
This is definitely an email to George Lucas about what they're
I don't know.
farming.
I know more about moisturizing,
Which they would need a lot of living on a desert planet.
Yes, where it potentially is like being on a roof for 24 hours a day.
Yes.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you to both of our guests for being with us for such a special episode. This is kicking off a trilogy of Star Wars films that we're doing back to back to back. Obviously, I announced it earlier during the show that we're doing The Empire Strikes Back next week, and then the following week we're doing Return of the Jedi. We're just crossing out all 3 OG Star Wars films in a row. But again, thank you to both of you for being here. Shane, please remind everybody what you're working on and where they can find you.
Midnight Facts for Insomniacs, podcast of fascinating facts, some humor thrown in. Me and my co-host have been doing this for, I think, 5 years as of this year, and it's going great. And we'd love to have anyone aboard. Join the Midnight Masses, become an Insomniac. So find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Excellent. And Jesse, what are you working on and where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. And like I said at the beginning of the show, if I actually get followers from this, I might actually post things on it. They'll be movie related. And yeah, I'll be working on my tan on the roofs for the rest of the summer because it is storm season for my job.
All right. Normally I would ask remaining thoughts here, but we are pre-recording this a little bit. So instead, I will just call a little bit of an audible and say that as of this week, this will be the first full week that we have started to put together what we feel will be a very special project coming out later this year. We cannot yet reveal all of the details for this, but note that this is a very large-scale project that we have combined to do an overlapping thing with a lot of the same guests that we've had on the show, other guests in our greater Cine podcaster universe, and we are very excited now that it is going to be live, that once we start getting the submissions back from everybody for this project, we'll be able to share the results with you. I'm very much looking forward to seeing kind of the combined efforts of everybody on this and where it will end up taking us, but just kind of a teaser that something will be coming up later in the year, probably at least not until the fall, and then we'll be able to share what's going on with all of this with you, and we look forward to being able to do so. So any quick thoughts from you, Dad?
I did finally get a chance to complete the first season of Landman. It was excellent. It just sucks you in and brings you right into the whole story. And it's not often that I find television so enthralling that I'm looking forward to the next season.
Our mutual friend, Kieran B., who was on last week's episode for Gladiator, is a very big Billy Bob Thornton fan, and I've thought many times of suggesting, because he's always looking for when Billy Bob's going to be good again, Landman is your answer. He is
Yes.
terrific in that series. So if you have Paramount Plus or access to it in some way, shape, or form, it's very easy to binge. I think I got through it in a few days. So definitely if you need something, and it's not even like harsh or non-casual viewing. It's very simple to watch, but it's very engaging. I would agree. So that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Do or do not. There is no try. Next week for our 261st episode, we welcome back Rob Conlon of Westport Studios and Andrew Corns of the Revisionist Almanac to discuss possibly the greatest sequel ever made for its 45th anniversary, The Empire Strikes Back from 1980. Directed by Irvin Kershner. Written by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. Cinematography by Peter Chasiski. Music by John Williams and starring Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Billy D. Williams. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, TikTok, or Blue Sky at the handle @GMOAT Podcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.